The Atlanta Braves will be in Grapefruit League action this weekend, which is just one more sign that baseball is indeed back. We're going to dive into some big spring training storylines in this edition of BPTV. I'm Grant McCauley alongside Chris Willis as always. Before we get going, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We're on the march to 5,000 subscribers. We hope you're very much one of those, and share the show with a friend. It can help us out and keep this thing growing. Chris, we sat through what felt like a long winter at times, but I can confirm baseball type things are happening down in Florida, and we're all kinds of ready for that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it did seem like it was a long winter. The Braves gave us a lot of things to talk about, but this happiest point of the offseason is when pitchers and catchers report, and we're on the eve of Grapefruit League action.
Yeah, my happiest time of any offseason is when it's over. And it is, in fact, over. I was down in Florida around the team and getting a good look at it. And let me tell you, one phrase I heard more than anything else during my trip to Northport is the obvious goal for the 2024 Braves, and that is World Series or bust. Chris, this is not a surprise. We all know that's the mission. They know the expectation, both internally and externally, begin and end right there. This is a club that seems aware of that fact and ready to put in the work to get back to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, and I think it's a little refreshing that they understand after two straight first round defeats that the what the expectations are. And it's good to see them embracing that. I'm a little bit interested to see how they go about it because, as we both know, MLB's regular season is a marathon, not a sprint. The playoffs are very much a sprint, though, and I think we're going to see that shift in mindset, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, experience is a great teacher. Failure is also quite the teacher. I know from personal experience, a lot of teams have overcome defeat in order to go on to bigger and better things in October. And the Atlanta Braves, they're one of those clubs. And I kept hearing from player after player after player, from Brian Snitker, from Alex Anthopoulos. Pretty much everyone understands the expectations are sky high for this team. The talent and the winning that they've done makes it impossible to avoid. One thing I took away from my conversation with Brian Snitker, though, and I think maybe this is to your point, something that I think helps set the tone for this team is that he never gets away from the importance of maximizing each day. Win today, then do it again tomorrow. It may seem like a small thing, but I think that's shown up big in Atlanta's success.
Yeah, I think that's a huge key to their regular season success, and it's hard to adopt anything else because if you're worrying about October and April, then you're gonna it's gonna cause issues. So, at the same time, once they get there, if they get there, they've got to check the boxes off. You've got to win the division, qualify for the postseason, and then you've got to set yourself up for success at that point. So, it's still going to be a process, but I do like to see, the intensity Spencer Strider's shown, Chris Sale. We know what kind of competitor that he is. So, it's going to be pretty exciting to see how it all mixes together on the field.
Yeah, and let's talk about Chris Sale here because he's one of the big headlines and one of the big moves that the Braves made over the offseason to hopefully make this club better. Obviously, what he can bring on the mound is one thing, but Sale being that true competitor is something that everyone is excited to add to the entire complement of the rotation and to this team. I think for good reason, Chris. He's healthy for the first time in a long time, and that makes quite the difference.
Yeah, and I mean, all the reviews I've seen from the spring so far is people raving about how he looks throwing the ball. But I think, like you said, I think he can have just as big an impact in the clubhouse because I think how you really do change that mentality is through the players that you acquire. I think Spencer Strider is that type of player. I think Chris Sale, we all know how big of a competitor he is. He's said it multiple times already how much he hates to lose, and I think that's how you change. An attitude, not really that this team needed to change in their attitude. I mean, they've been wildly successful, but at the same time, bringing a little bit of edge to it, I think there's some value in that.
Yeah, a little bit of fire, some different kind of personalities that can all fit together and be part of the right mixture for a team. We've talked a lot about Sale, you and I have, from the trade to the contract extension, all about his health status, which has been an ongoing storyline for 5 years. Sale said he feels great this spring, got that normal winter for the first time since 2018, was already working at the Braves complex pretty much right after the trade happened. I remember the first time we talked to him
Mhm.
on a media availability, he did the Zoom from Northport. So he's excited to be back on the mound and back to work. Asking what some of the others starters thought about Chris Sale and what he could mean to this rotation, this team in general, you just got the feeling that everybody's excited about this acquisitions for some of the reasons we've talked about, and some of the reasons that hopefully we'll find out come with a healthy Chris Sale on the mound every fifth day.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he can have a huge impact on the rest of the rotation as well because, he's a guy that's won the World Series. He's been through the wars. He's been through injuries. I mean, he's overcome a lot of obstacles, and you just feel like he can have a positive impact on the rest of that rotation, and especially the young guys. But even a veteran like Max Fried can
Mhm.
probably draw something from Chris Sale.
I saw Max Fried spending a lot of time with Chris Sale, and for good reason. He was watching bullpens and doing all the PFP, all the side work, and all the starters are lockered pretty much in a row next to one another in that Braves clubhouse. So there's a lot of conversations, and you're never too old or too experienced to learn something else when it comes to the game of baseball and perhaps life. So maybe file that nugget away if you want to here on BPTV. I know we went through the World Series or bust conversation already here, but hearing from Sale this past week, he's excited to be on a club that has this kind of expectations, and he knows a thing or two, as you said, about winning a World Series himself. That experience plus a competitive nature, both things that could elevate the Braves in 2024 as they chase that goal. Now, Chris, looking at this roster as a whole, there are not a lot of position battles to talk about this spring, unlike years past. And unlike the shortstop vacancy we saw a year ago that had everyone's attention, the most intriguing competition will undoubtedly be for the final spot in the Braves rotation. You've got Bryce Elder and Reynaldo Lopez, I think, headlining that mix. But there are some other names in camp to keep an eye on. How do you size up the battle for this spot, and which way do you think it ultimately goes, at least to start the season? Because we know plans could change.
I mean, the Braves have a plenty of options, for that spot. It does feel like to me that at least from starting out, that it's between Reynaldo Lopez and Bryce Elder. At this point, Lopez is obviously transitioning back to a starter. I think it makes sense if you want to do that. If you want to take a look at him, you need to do it now
Mhm.
because it's a whole lot easier to get him stretched out in the spring than it would be, mid-season or something. So that's going to be interesting. But as you said, we saw Winans, Darius Vines, Dylan Dodd, AJ Smith-Shawver. We saw all those guys throw innings last year and make starts for the Braves. If any of them have a great spring, they can bring themselves into the conversation as well.
At the very least, I mean, I know they've made a first impression with what they did a year ago, as you pointed out, but making a good impression in camp that lets them know, the Braves, that being them, that hey, there is quality depth down here is going to be important. And let me throw another name into the mix, Hurston Waldrop. He was a first round pick not even a year ago. It happened in July. It's part of the All Star festivities, which is going to take me a while to get used to. But this is a kid that pitched at every full season affiliate level for the Braves last year. Clearly, they believe in the stuff. The splitter was the talk after he was drafted. They feel like that was a major league ready pitch. So if they deem him at some point necessary in 2024, I don't think that would be a surprise either. And I can't help but bring this up because, as you pointed out, the Braves used a lot of their depth last year. They used 30 pitchers in total, 16 different starters. 3 of them would be qualified as an opener. But if that doesn't underscore the importance of this depth and having quality at that, I don't know what does, because they feel good about the layers and some of the names that we've talked about here thus far. Some prospects, some guys returning from Tommy John. There are some options because Huascar Noah appears to be healthy. Ian Anderson could be coming along at some point this season. Chris, it does look like a pretty well-rounded group, and it looks like it could come in waves if the Braves need it to.
Yeah, and it's important too because you only have to look back to a year ago to see how quickly you can go through all that depth.
Mhm.
A couple of injuries and to key guys, and all of a sudden, looking around having to throw bullpen games,
Yeah.
to try to cover starts. So, it's very important. I think the way things are shaping up, it looks like they've got a lot of numbers right now. Hopefully, you can keep everybody healthy because if you do, then this depth is going to be a big strength during the regular season.
Yeah, you want it to be strength in numbers. No two ways about it. Elsewhere on the Braves depth chart, I guess we could look at backup outfielder as one other battle to watch this spring. Both Brian Snicker and Alex Anthopoulos indicated that they want some speed available off the bench. I don't think anybody has more of that than Forrest Wall, but he's also a lefty hitter like Jared Kelnick. Eli White is back with the Braves. He's a defensive standout who can run pretty well, play all 3 outfield spots as well. Jordan Luplow, because we're in our time machine from 2023, is also back in Braves camp. Both those guys, Luplow and White, bat right-handed. They could complement Kelnick. However, like we've talked about, the Braves seem set on giving Jared Kelnick the at-bats against lefties and righties to open up the year, and I think that's a good thing, in my opinion. So maybe that lessens the importance of who exactly this outfielder is in terms of expecting them to get regular playing time.
Yeah, and I think that goes into the calculus. I think, a lot of fans have speculated about some of the veteran options that are still out there. But at the end of the day, if the Braves are planning on playing Jerry Kelnick every day, along
Mhm.
with Michael Harris and Ronald Acuna, there's just not a whole lot of opportunity for playing time, for some of those veteran options. So you look at the internal guys, Eli White, I thought he was impressive in spring last year. Jordan Luplow got hurt early, and that really set him back.
Mhm.
Both of those guys are right-handed. Personally, I would give the edge to a right-handed complement at this point in the bench, but I also think at some point we could see some other names show up on this list as teams start to pare down because, as we pointed out weeks before, that the Braves have some flexibility with their 40-man roster now. They can claim guys if as teams start to pare down. So this bench decision may be something that evolves throughout the spring.
Yeah, it could be. And with a designated hitter, it's changed the dynamic of how a National League roster is constructed because now you essentially are not having to figure out, 3 or 4 pinch hit opportunities per night. Maybe you still have 1 or 2, but it's far less often. You can still do the pinch runner, and I think that's why they point to speed as being important. And there are several outfielders in this camp that could give Atlanta an option, but I'm with you. I kind of think that they could look to see who else might get cut loose in spring training as other clubs have to get down and make those cuts to get to 26 men for opening day. Alex Anthopoulos, though, said something really interesting as well, is that as they've looked at different players for trades and for signings, it's kind of difficult based on how set the Braves are in so many different positions to entice a veteran player who would like to have that playing time and be able to say, hey, we can give it to you because the Braves simply don't have that to go around. I think it's kind of an obvious thing, but I'd never really thought about it that day because a lot of times when you start playing the trade game of, okay, well, this guy bats right handed, you could go get him, or you could trade for this particular player and maybe plug him in. But the Braves don't necessarily have the at bats to go around. And I think that was especially true for players out there right now, free agents that are looking for deals. And I feel like this conversation really kind of ramped up when Randall Grichuk signed because folks were still thinking about who's the right handed platoon partner for Jared Kelnick. But there are a lot of different, I think, nuances to how exactly Atlanta might approach this.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at a guy like Kevin Pillar. I mean, you feel like if the Braves had gave him the opportunity, perhaps to come back and form a platoon with Kelenic in left field, I feel like he'd probably still be here. But they're intent on giving Kelenic the full complement of a bats and as an everyday player, so it changes the calculus a little bit. I still, if I'm projecting a bench, I'd like to have a right-handed bat there, but I don't think it's a certainty as Alex Anthopoulos pointed out. J.P. Martinez, Forrest Wall. They feel like they can provide them something as a center field option, a guy that could play center and a pinch runner with some speed. They could probably earn their way onto this into this bench pitcher. So it's going to be something to keep an eye on as it goes. But you're right. I mean, no more than the Braves have utilized the bench over the last few years. It's hard to entice a veteran to come in and sign on without a guarantee of at least a little bit of playing time.
Yeah, and I think something interesting about the Braves and the way they're set up at catcher is, and we've seen this when there's a big opportunity and Brian Snitker needs to take a shot with a couple runners on base. He's got Travis d'Arnaud available to him or Sean Murphy that day. The Braves can pull that lever and go that way. I know you try to be careful about how you deploy your catchers from day to day, but give them a little bit of time off and whatnot. But still, having that to utilize makes the Braves, I think, a little bit more dangerous on the bench than folks might think about. Let's close out with an outfielder who's not in spring training fighting for a job. He has a job with this club he'd like to keep for a very long time, and his name is Ronald Acuna Jr., the unanimous MVP of the National League and a bona fide superstar. He told reporters, including myself this past week, that he wants to be a Brave for life. That's what he's hoping for. Those comments seem to take on a life of their own and were taken out of context by some not so plugged in reports that I think were just hunting clicks. Acuna was simply asked what he thought about his future beyond his current contract. The answer was pretty simple. It's no secret. I want to be a Brave for life. I hope we can make it happen soon. That doesn't really sound like a demand to me or foreshadowing of a holdout for the tinfoil hat crew out there. Ronald still has up to 5 years away from free agency. The Braves aren't up against any deadline to get a deal done, but I'll go ahead and state the obvious here, Chris. If you're looking for a way to secure the long-term future of this club, getting an extension done with Acuna seems like a pretty great way to do so because players like this, they don't come around too often.
You're right. I mean, after I saw the quote from Ronald during during camp there, I tweeted out that if he's interested, the Braves need to act quickly and try to make
Sure.
this happen as soon as you can, because at the closer he gets to free agency, we all know how much harder it becomes to make a deal.
Yeah.
I feel like Ronald's gonna, he can pretty much set his mark. I mean, that's going to be a crazy contract if he wants it to be his next one, obviously. But at the same time, if he's comfortable, he's here. I feel like there's there's some compromise. There's a path for a deal at some point. Knowing the way these things go, though, we probably won't hear anything that much about it. If there are any discussions on the side. But yeah, it was great to see him say that, and it was a shame that it kind of got taken out of context.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I don't want to throw a bunch of numbers at this because who knows when this thing could happen and how exactly it could look. But Acuna's initial deal, the one he's under right now, 3 more guaranteed years and then 2 club options. So if the Braves could find a way to get, say a 10-year deal in place, likely north of what Austin Riley got, his club record $212 million contract, that would go a long way towards securing a man who may end up being one of the greatest players to ever put on a Braves uniform on his way to Cooperstown at the rate that he's going. Who am I to question the talent of Ronald Acuna Jr.? And may I point out as well, this dude's just entering his prime.
Yeah, he's just getting started. I mean, I thought last year was in a lot of ways a breakout, which is weird to say when you look. He just almost was 40-40 in 2019. So, he just seems to keep getting better, and he's a fixture in this. He's going to be a fixture in this lineup, but I think he's also going to be a fixture from a league standpoint. Now he was named, as far as being recognized as one of the best players in the game.
Well, regardless of the chatter around this contract, I don't think that Acuna is going to spend any time making this a talking point for himself or the club over the next 3 to 5 years. And there's certainly a path and a possibility for a deal getting done. As the Braves have shown, they're not bashful about signing their players to long-term extensions. That's going to bring us to the end of this episode of BPTV. As always, I invite you to hit that subscribe button right here to the Battery Power channel on YouTube. Make sure you click that bell. You get notified every time we drop a new episode, which will be coming your way on a weekly basis as we count down to opening day and cover the biggest stories across spring training for the Atlanta Braves and some of the rest of Major League Baseball as well. Once again, for Chris Willis, I'm Grant McCauley. Thanks for riding along with us. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, Braves country.